Wakanda forever. How y'all doing out there again? We've got some more people who've joined us in on the conversation about the movie Black Panther, which has taken the world by a storm. We have Cecilia Olusola Tribble, who is a community and organizational development coordinator for Metro Arts in the Nashville Office of Arts and Culture. She designs and leads programs that reduce racism and provide restorative justice, creating arts opportunities for minoritized persons through grants and education. And right now we also have with us Matthew Charlton, who is based in Nashville, Tennessee. In his role as the Assistant General Secretary for Collegiate Ministries of the United Methodist Church, he has visited college campuses and met with students all over the United States and the world. He has also taught theology at Methodist Theological School in Ohio. How are you all doing this afternoon?
Really awesome.
I'm doing great.
Excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
We have with us in the studio Reverend Joseph Tribble, who is the Dean of Resident Life and teaches at the American Baptist College here in Nashville, Tennessee. He's a deep thinker. He also writes Christian education literature for youth and young adults. We have with us, coming from Montgomery, Alabama, on the line, Idongesit Mkpong-Ruffin. She is the Department Chair of Computer Science at Faulkner University in Montgomery, Alabama. A native of Nigeria, she has lived in the States for many years, raising a daughter who became an activist for improved race relations on the campus of Vanderbilt University. And finally, we also have Mr. Damien Durr, Reverend Damien Durr, who is the Minister of Outreach at the Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. He is a prolific preacher and educator with the Marion Wright Edelman's Freedom Schools, and he also designs programs that engage youth and young adults. Hello, Damien.
Good afternoon.
All right. Hello, Idong.
Hello.
All right. And how you doing, Joseph?
I'm all right. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good.
Related to what I was saying about redefining Black, especially for white people, and seeing Black not as bad, but as something beautiful and good and wonderful, and a true experience. This is for many people, and I think this film contributes to it, a process of decolonization. All right, we scholars talk about the colonial period historically. We talk about post-colonialism, the practice of seeing a culture as removing itself from its colonial past and reestablishing itself as its own culture. And now people in formerly colonized countries are talking about the decolonial aspects of what they try to do. So how are they? They're actively looking to identify ways that they are thinking and acting and doing that are expressions of the colonizer, and removing those and doing their best to refill that space with indigenous ways of thinking. So in a way, this movie as a whole is an expression of that decolonial mindset. It's telling everyone who watches it that Black culture in Africa is not a bereft, poverty-ridden, war-stricken, dirt road and mud hut place, but rather the people of Africa are cosmopolitan and open. Well,
this is what I love about the architecture, and from the architecture to the costumes to the face, the hair, many of even the buildings that you saw in the cities of Wakanda were based on buildings that came from Great Zimbabwe, from Mali Empire, from all over the continent in ancient kingdoms. They built on these things. I mean, people still don't know how Egyptian built the pyramids. So it kind of brings that kind of history and technology. This is already embedded in Africa.
Right.
Vibranium is a fictional element, but there is a core, an ore that is in Africa only, coltan, that is used for cell phones and for modern technology. So I think that it makes us think about those things.
Yeah. I mean, if I could jump in, I feel like this is an opportunity for the viewer to decolonize ourselves. But I think Wakanda itself is inviting us to imagine that colonization never happened. Right? So it's not even about decolonization of them, but it is, as you know, colonization is not even a part of the fabric of who they are.
That's right.
You know. Yeah.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for your participation. Something that, as we kind of maybe wind up on this particular segment, what about the women? What about the women?
They're amazing. I love them. The fact that you have, again, I mentioned Okoye, the general, who talks about the wig as, and you know, the I can't even think about this without doing my body, you know, on the car, you know, with her dress billowing, and she's like wielding a thing, and you know, she's like, and she's, you know, swaying back and forth to dodge the bullets. And I'm not an action person, so you know, I mean, the vision of that with her dress, and you know, guns are so primitive, particularly at this cultural moment where we're dealing with the ramifications of an over-militarized state and the ways in which guns and white supremacy are linked. The, you know, the vision of her using her natural strength and the, you know, vibranium, whatever, you know, sword thing, you know, is incredible. And, you know, when T'Challa comes back from the dead, which I'm sure you guys are, you know, that's the most obvious theological link there. You know, when he comes back from the dead, who's his army? Are this group of women who, you know, yeah, incredible. And I mean, and, you know, Nakia, her character, you know, Lupita Nyong'o's, you know, incredible angel face, you know, you know, the fact that she goes undercover to, that's her job. She's a spy to go undercover to save things, to save people and to save things.
I think that one of the things that I really liked, I was thinking about it as I was thinking about this, the film itself was kind of the sneaky way that they introduced Black beauty. In particular, the beauty of the women. So much has been said about the women and the power that they wielded, but I think the movie kind of sneakily engaged us into thinking about the beauty of these sisters, in particular the character of Nakia, recalling one of the early scenes of the film in which T'Challa is preparing to go out on a mission. And so the general says to him, don't stare. You know, and I find myself, I wasn't, you know, really that familiar with the story of Black Panther. And so I'm wondering, you know, what does that mean? Like, don't stare. Is this a case of Medusa? Something bad is going to happen, whatever. And it becomes apparent that he's staring because he thinks that she's so beautiful. At the same time, even as beautiful as she is and many of the other women who are on screen, they're never objectified. They never become sex objects. And so that beauty is something that is not seen as central to who they are as people, yet it accentuates the exterior beauty that they have. have. It accentuates that which is going on inside and the varied capabilities that they all have. Because, I mean, she's obviously not the only beautiful one on the screen. I mean, you got Angela Bassett, and when in her 60s, she's still one of the baddest women on the planet. And so many others who, you know, that dawn that screen and that space in such a wonderful way, but how that beauty was displayed and yet not objectified.
All right. I like that a whole lot, that the beauty was displayed, but not objectified. So we can do that, all right? We can admire the beauty of women. We can admire the beauty of one another without making it a thing. Someone else.
I think the most powerful character in that movie was not the Black Panther, but it was Shuri. Mm-hmm. She was the one who harnessed the powers of vibranium. She was the one who created these new technologies for healing. And she's an incredible example to young women. If my 6-year-old were a little bit older, I'd take her to see that movie because it would be an example to her that she can engage in science and technology. Mm-hmm. Even though we like to think we're an advanced culture, there's still ways that we don't encourage women and African American women and people of color generally to engage in the scientific fields. Mm-hmm. So again, it is to me an extended effort of decolonizing the mind, to steal a title of a book, for people to think differently about the culture they live in and the possibilities that are available to all different kinds of people.
Yeah. And I think on that note, I mean, I feel like there are talks of Shuri even becoming the next Black Panther, but
hey,
I don't
there you
know.
go. Mm-hmm.
That might just be a pop culture rumor.
I think the reflection of the excellence that is us, that is sometimes needs to be propped up by others, or there's a tendency to believe that standing on our own, we can't be as excellent as we are.
All right.
And finally, we have a movie that stood on its own and did not need that propping up.
Okay. So we not only have, when you look at the movie, you have this nation that's standing on its own, and then you also have the production of the movie, in which you have Black people who are in charge, who have done the writing, who are doing the acting, Black people from all over the world. You have even creating the costumes, Ruth Carter. I know the first time that I ever saw anything she does was in a Spike Lee movie. All right, and now here she is, with in a movie that has this big budget. So it was great to see that coming for someone else.
And I'll say, in light of superheroes, looking at the trend of content that's been created from 16, really Ava DuVernay, and then Nate Parker, and then Fences, and then Hidden Figures. So a continued trend of our narratives sharing particular pieces, which for me, as I kept talking about Hidden Figures, talking about superheroes and she-roles that didn't get that weren't created in a lab and an explosion. And so when you think about the Marvel Universe, all of the superheroes and she-roles, Wonder Woman, Captain America, Batman, Superman, Incredible Hulk, finally a narrative, because we've been superheroes without all of that. So for me to see that on screen as well, and then the Black Panther's ability coming from, I read something that said his ability coming from skill, inheritance, and from the earth. Very different even than the creation of other superheroes. So I think that combined with what Africa has meant to the world in providing so many resources, and so many resources obviously being exploited from the continent. So to see it on screen in terms of what Wakanda represents, but then the people and the actors and actresses there, and the intentionality behind, I think, offering a very intentional counter narrative to the way in which the Marvel Universe has been shaped, because it's been shaped in the image of whiteness forever. So for me, it was just refreshing in terms of the hues of Blackness that was on screen, as well as the costumes and all of the other intentional pieces of African culture that were woven into what we saw.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Well, I guess what I will say about the film is along those same lines. One of the thought that I've had is blackity black black black, and what I mean by that is obviously as we talk about black actors, we talk about black production, all the way down to even where parts of the movie were shot, being shot at Tyler Perry Studios. And so to see the infusion of Blackness on screen, but also behind screen, that then enabled that which was taking place on screen to come to life, to share that narrative of a lack of exploitation, a narrative in which obviously you have vibranium that is there and is the main source of their strength and their power, their might, but also obviously taking that and putting that in conversation with what Africa has had. What was mentioned before was Coltrane, but thinking about the gold, but the people obviously that have been taken from Africa down throughout the ages, and to think about resources and the way in which they ultimately get yielded and positioned to create power, and that these people in Wakanda then decided to say, we're going to tell our own story, we'll tell our own narrative, and even if that means shielding ourselves from the rest of the world, we have a right and a duty to protect that which has been gifted to us. And seeing that, I guess, from a perspective of even, thinking about the varied gifts that people and groups of people have, and their ability then to protect those gifts and to use those gifts ultimately for their own benefit.
And thinking about that, the posturing in terms of the whole Wakanda being a place that wasn't colonized, and getting us to imagine that, and seeing no one deferential, no one subservient, just in terms of the roles and characters we have played on screen traditionally, and even in different superhero films, how our characters sometimes still is acting in a deferential role. And so I think one of the things that was just so wonderful to see on screen, and that has something to do with just posture, right? Just the pride in terms of how everyone looked and talked and addressed each other, and to see somebody who was African with the lip plate on screen, not being portrayed in ways that usually would be more akin to what they would try to portray us as savage, but yet with a sense of royalty. And it was just that sense of royalty, because obviously I'm thinking about Coming to America a little bit in terms of Eddie taking us to Zamunda first, and what that kind of pride and how people postured there, and then looking now at Wakanda, that was not in the DNA of those in Wakanda. And I think that within itself, if there was not even any dialogue, but to just see that no one was ashamed, no one was shamed, and everybody that played a role was very confident, very prideful, and very powerful. And even the way in which I think reciprocity was displayed between Okoye, Nakia, and T'Challa, and the uniqueness of seeing Black men and Black women on screen, as Joe would say, the women not being objectified, and even T'Challa not being so hyper masculinized to a great degree, where he still exhibits grace and mercy, and it's him exhibiting mercy, which I think has something to do with the culture of Wakanda, that ultimately saves his life later with M'Baku, because he says a life for a life. So because you spared my life in that moment when we were battling because of the challenge, now I also will spare your life. And I think that reciprocity piece, which has something to do with the pride, because even M'Baku didn't, when they had the plant, he could have drank it, but he chose not to, and let them make sure that T'Challa got it. So I thought that was just significant as well, that he didn't even seek to seize the power and become the Black Panther, but had enough respect for T'Challa and everything in terms of what T'Challa represented, that he allowed them to make sure that T'Challa got that as well. So I think the pride and the power and the reciprocity were also very positive things as well.
Mm-hmm. Idong, you want to jump in here? Yeah, okay.
Sure. Echoing some of the things that we've already heard, for me, the recognition of strength and dignity of all and their talents and the acceptance of their differences was positive thing to see. And when we look at the fact that Mbaku gets to the point of saying, I'm challenging you, and nobody looks at that and goes, go sit down. You know, this is how this works. You know, this is how this works. As much as we don't like it, and I found that to be interesting. I found it to be interesting the way that Nakia, when she realizes I have to help the queen and the princess, and how they go to Mbaku, there's a sense of respect that they approach him wanting his help.
Mm-hmm.
That is very beautiful to see.
Yes. Yes.
As an African, there was a lot of resonance of things that I grew up seeing that very, very, those that did the research for doing the movie touched on some really core things that were very nice to see. And I echo the fact again that differences were accepted and celebrated with dignity, as already stated.